Sahana Vavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahavidyan Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Chaiva Tato Jayamudirayet. Good. Welcome back. We've come towards the end of the current chapter where we're seeing this dialogue, fascinating dialogue between Markandeya and Yudhishthira. And just to recap the last class, remember Yudhishthira asked Markandeya to please describe what happens during pralaya. Pralaya means the solution of the universe. And Markandeya is one of the few people that can actually answer that question because Markandeya is a Chittaranjan. One of the doors should be left open. I'm not sure why they're all closed. Would someone please go and prop open one of the doors so that people don't... Is it closed for a reason? I think we should still leave one door open, otherwise people may not know that they can come. Just one door. Thank you. Otherwise somebody might not know that the class is going on. Markandeya, as a Chittaranjan, as someone with an extraordinarily long lifespan, he actually witnessed the end of the last cycle of creation and the beginning of the current cycle of creation. He narrated all this to Yudhishthira, and the story was pretty amazing. He said first there was a terrible drought for many years. Everything got very dried up, and then there was a fire. And that fire was fanned by terrible winds. Everything got burnt up. And after the fire, then it started raining. Not just raining, it was a deluge to such an extent that the entire planet was flooded. We can imagine, if all the glaciers melt, what will this planet look like? That's the idea. Everything was flooded. But Markandeya noticed one very strange thing. Out of the floodwaters, he saw one giant banyan tree was sticking out. And near that banyan tree was a little baby boy, a child, floating on a leaf of that banyan tree. And that boy was this boy. That very familiar image. And so this is the story that accompanies this image. The story of, at the end of creation, Markandeya discovers this boy at the time of pralaya. He's very surprised. So Markandeya asks this boy, "Who are you and what are you doing here?" And, oh no, excuse me, that comes later. In fact, that's today's class. Before Markandeya can ask anything, this boy opens his mouth wide, really wide. And Markandeya is drawn into this boy's mouth. He enters the boy's stomach, and he sees in the boy's stomach the entire world, with all the towns and cities, with all the forests and people and animals. He sees the entire world. We discussed the very important symbolism of that in the last class. What Markandeya witnessed is the world in an avyakta avastha. Avyakta, unmanifest, avastha, condition. At the end of time, the world does not become non-existent. At the end of time, the world becomes unmanifest. Why? We had a long discussion. As Sri Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Nasato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sataha. We discussed that verse. Chapter 2, verse 16, where Sri Krishna explains that what is existent can never become non-existent. What is non-existent can never become existent. So the world cannot become non-existent, because if the world becomes non-existent, how will there be another world? The world does not become non-existent. The world becomes unmanifest. The metaphor we used is like the tree. When it dies, it leaves behind a seed. In the seed, the tree exists in an unmanifest condition. Eventually, the seed sprouts, and the tree becomes manifest once again. So this is what Markandeya understood when he saw the entire universe in the boy. The boy, by the way, as we're going to see, in fact, he himself is going to tell him, he looks like Sri Krishna, for obvious reasons. He says in a couple of verses, I am Narayana. So this boy represents Narayana. And so after Markandeya sees the entire world in an unmanifest condition in the boy's belly, Markandeya lives there for a long time until the next cycle of creation. Prior to the next cycle of creation, Markandeya is expelled from the boy's stomach by a puff of air. He pops out of the boy's mouth. Pretty strange story. He pops out of the boy's mouth and he asks the boy, he said, hey, who are you? You're not an ordinary boy. After all, during Pralaya, no ordinary boy is going to be floating on a leaf. The entire universe has been destroyed. So he obviously is not an ordinary boy. So we saw at the end of the last class, Jnatum ichchami devatvam. I want to understand who are you. Mayam cha imam tava uttamam. And I also want to understand your power of Maya. Who are you and how did you create this universe? To which the boy replies, Deva vacha deva kamam devapi mam vipra kamam devapi mam navijananti tattvataha navijananti tatprati Tvat-pritya tu pravakshami Tvat-pritya tu Yatedam visrajamyaham Yatedam visrajamyaham. So the boy says, Devaha api, even the gods. Navijananti in the second line. Even the gods do not know Mam, me. Tattvataha, as I truly am. Kamam, just by according to their desire. Even the gods who desire to see me, to know me, the gods do not know me as I truly am. Even the gods do not know me as I truly am. Vipra, O Brahmana, the boy addresses Markandeya. Even the gods do not know me as I truly am. Who knows Ishvara as Ishvara truly is? Whatever you think, that's a nice observation. Whatever you think Ishvara is, you're wrong. Because Ishvara is more than that. Ishvara is more than we can imagine, more than anyone can imagine. So therefore, any concept you have is less than Ishvara truly is. Then who can truly understand and comprehend who is Ishvara? Well, you know the answer to that question already. Ishvara alone understands who Ishvara is. In fact, in Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 10, Arjuna says, I made a note, Swayam eva atmanatmanam veta. In chapter 10, Arjuna says to Sri Krishna, he says, I want to know who you are. And he says, you are the only one who really knows who you really are. No one else knows who you really are, but Swayameva, you alone, Atmana, Atmanam, Veta, you alone, Veta, know. Atmanam, your true nature, Atmana, by yourself. You alone know, so therefore you alone are qualified to tell me who you really are. So, what we're going to see in the next few verses is a description of Ishvara by Ishvara. All right, let's see that. It begins. Aham Narayano Nama, Aham Narayano, Prabhava Shashvato Vyayaha, Prabhava Shashvat, Vedhata Sarva Bhutanam, Vedhata Samharta Cha Dvajottama, Samharta Cha Dvajottama. Aham Narayanaha Nama. Without knowing Sanskrit, you know what that means. I am known as Narayana. I am Narayana by name. And Prabhavaha Shashvataha Avyayaha. I am the Prabhava. I am the source. The source of what? The source of the universe. What kind of source? Shashvataha, eternal source. I existed before the universe existed. I exist when the universe no longer, I shouldn't say not exist. I existed when the universe was unmanifest. I continue to exist when the universe is manifest. And I am avyayaha, unchanging. Unchanging means, what is it? Here. Unchanging in that form. That's what he says. I'm unchanging. I'm always this boy. And there's by the way, there's tremendous symbolism there. But I'll recall, I want to remind you of a discussion we had 2-3 classes ago. And that is, this we should consider as mythology. Mythology means what? Stories which have great symbolic significance. We do not take this as a historical record. If somebody chooses to treat this as a historical record, I won't say anything. You're welcome to treat this as a historical record. For me, personally, it's impossible to treat this as a historical event. It's not a historical event. It's a mythological story. The purpose of these mythological stories, then, is to teach us through the symbolism. And before we end this chapter, we'll see the symbolism of why does he appear in the form of a boy. So in the form of the boy, he says, Aham avyayaha. I'm always in the form of a boy. That's what he said. Then, Prabhavaha Shashvataha Avyayaha. I am the Prabhava. I am the source of the universe. Not only is he the source of the universe, but Vidhata, the one who supports and sustains Sarva Bhutanam, all creatures. He's not only the source of the universe, he is the sustainer of the universe. And he is not only the source and sustainer of the universe, he is the Samharta, the destroyer of the universe. Dvajottama, O best of Brahmins, he addresses Markandeya. I am the Prabhava, the source. I am the Vidhata, the sustainer. And the Samharta, the destroyer. Now, some of you are thinking, wait a minute, I thought we said that Brahma is the Prabhava, the source. Vishnu is the sustainer. And Shiva is the destroyer. All of that is correct from one perspective. From another perspective, we see in the Rig Veda, and I've mentioned this is an important verse that occurs early in the Rig Veda. It says, Ekam Sat, Vipra Bahuda Varanti. And here the context is talking about God. And it says, Sat here means Ishvara, means God. Ekam Sat, God is one. Vipraha, the wise ones. Bahudha, in many ways, Varanti, describe that one God. One God described in many forms. You know this very well. Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva are the same. You know that. Why do we have different names? Because we like to do that. We like that. This is something unique to the Hindu tradition that you might take for granted. If you were raised in India, absolutely you would take this for granted. The assumption that of course we worship one God in many forms. That seems so obvious. Please recognize that other religions don't follow that at all with great consequences. Suppose, I'll just give you a personal story. So I was raised in a Christian family. I attended Christian school as a boy, and I was taught all this Christianity. And as a young boy, I was actually very pious. I was very emotionally involved in the religion. But as I got a little bit older, what happens to many children, when they start thinking and when they start questioning, they didn't have very good answers for me. And here's the problem. Suppose, just to make it very specific, suppose as a child I was told that after they assassinated Jesus, that after 3 days he came back to life. And suppose as a boy I were to doubt that. How can Jesus come back? He was dead. How can he come back? And suppose as a boy I thought, that can't be. I don't believe that. Here's the problem. Christianity is focused on Jesus. If you don't believe in Jesus, you're out of luck. There's nothing in Christianity for you if you don't believe in a resurrection. This is crucial. This is the essence of the Christian tradition. Many sincere Christians believe in the divinity of Jesus, and they're blessed by it. Absolutely, they're blessed by it. I, on the other hand, as a boy, I could no longer believe in Jesus. What option did I have? I could no longer be a Christian. Now, suppose you're raised in a Hindu family, and you'll be specific. You're raised in a Hindu family, and you say, how can this be God? What kind of God is that? I don't believe in that. Fine, no problem. Go find a different form. Sorry to be a little silly. You don't have to believe in this form. You get freedom of choice. We understand this as a principle of Ishta Devata. A Devata, a form of Ishvara, which is Ishta, chosen by you. This, as I said, many of you may take this for granted if you were raised in India, but it should not be taken for granted. This indeed is one of the glories of the Hindu tradition, that you are given the freedom to conceive of Ishvara in any way you want. How did we open our program? Any way that you conceive of Ishvara is less than Ishvara truly is anyway. Can any of us conceive of Ishvara as Ishvara truly is? No. Therefore, however we conceive of Ishvara, it's less than who Ishvara truly is, then fine. Then why not? We have a variety of ways in which we envision Ishvara, in which we conceive of Ishvara, and these various forms and aspects then become the focus of our individual prayer lives, our devotional lives. And this is so crucial in Hinduism. In a philosophical sense, it's called the principle of adhikari bheda. A principle that acknowledges that we are all unique and individual. Being unique and individual, we all have unique individual spiritual needs. Some of you have heard me reflect before that other religions are, to use American English expressions, most other religions are one size fits all. Like you go into the clothing store, one size fits all. By the way, in a clothing store, if the rack says one size fits all, is that really true? They just say it. It's not really true. Not at all is it really true. So here, in the Hindu tradition, we have the opposite of one size fits all. We have the freedom to conceive and envision Ishvara in whatever way is helpful to you and me. That's the basic principle. This should not be taken for granted. It's very important. A final comment before we return to the class is This is one of the many factors that makes Hinduism much more complicated than other religious traditions. Most other religions are pretty simple. This is Jesus. We pray to Jesus. Whatever. This is Allah. We can't show a picture, but we pray to Allah. Whatever name, whatever way that they conceive. That's the way they pray. In Hinduism, we say you can pray like this, you can pray like that, you can conceive of Ishvara like this, you can conceive of Ishvara like that. A great variety of traditions, of practices, and that makes Hinduism, when compared to other religious tradition, it makes Hinduism so much more complex. Now, that complexity on the surface may seem undesirable. In fact, an anecdote, this is a true story. I was teaching a bunch of young children. One boy, maybe an 8-year-old, said, "Swamiji, Hinduism is too confusing." Why is it too confusing? He says, in fact, the boy said, not only Hinduism is too confusing, he said, "I like Christianity, it's simple." And I asked him, "What do you mean?" "Well, if you're Christian, you just pray Jesus, no problem. But if you're Hindu," the boy explained, "I have to remember that if I'm studying for a test, I have to pray Goddess Saraswati. If I have some problem in my life, I have to remember to pray Ganapati. If I need more allowance, I have to remember to pray Goddess Lakshmi." He says, "I have to remember who's who." And he said, "My Christian friends, they just have to pray Jesus." So, from this boy's perspective, the complexity of Hinduism was problematic for him. He was an 8-year-old. We're not 8. And here's the point. Complexity is not necessarily a problem. Complexity can be a tremendous virtue. Think, and a good example, I've given this example before, is in music. Would you listen to a music which sounded like this? Sa re, sa re, sa, sa re, sa re, sa. That's it. Is that music? It's simple. It lacks complexity. We love complexity in music. That's where the richness of music comes. The richness of music comes specifically in its complexity. I would argue that the complexity that we find in the Hindu tradition is its richness. Does it make it more complicated to understand and teach? Yes. But just like in music, is classical music harder to understand than popular music? Yeah. You have to understand more, but the richness of the classical music is so much more than the richness of the popular music. So the bottom line is this complexity represents the richness of Hinduism, the many forms in which we worship God is part of that richness, and it is a fact that we shouldn't take for granted. It really is the glory of the tradition. Okay, enough said. So coming back to this, Aham Narayanaha Nama, I am Narayana by name. I am the creator, sustainer, destroyer. I am Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. Then why does he use the word Narayana? Let's talk about that for a moment. Why doesn't he say, I am Ishvara? Ishvara means God in general, or Bhagavan. These are like generic names. If we can use that expression, if we want a generic name for God, we can use words like Ishvara, which means Lord, or Bhagavan, which means the Blessed One. And these don't imply a particular form of God. So you might argue, well, why doesn't he say, I am Ishvara, I am Bhagavan? Why does he use Narayana, which is, let's use the word sectarian. It's so he's not saying I'm Shiva. Somebody who's a Shaivite, a worshipper of Shiva, might be offended. Why is he saying I'm Narayana? Why doesn't he use the word Shiva? But then again, somebody who's a devotee of Vishnu would get upset if it was Shiva. This is a unique principle. I think we referenced this in a prior class. When we're speaking of Ishvara, the one God, as opposed to Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, etc., as opposed to all of these various forms or aspects of God, when we're talking about the one God, why is the word Narayana used? We talked about this in a prior class. If you're reading a Vaishnava scripture, if you are reading in the Bhagavata Purana, for example, the one God is referred to as Vishnu or Narayana. On the other hand, when you're reading in the Skanda Purana, the one God is referred to as Shiva. Which means what? There is one God, but you can give that one God any name you want. So here he says, Aham Narayana Nama. He says, I am called Narayana. I am called Narayana. Here, let's put it like this. In fact, I'll make up my own verse. The boy says, I am called Narayana by the Vaishnavas. I am called Shiva by the Shaivas. I am called Ganapati by the Ganapatyas. I am called Devi by the Shaktas. I am called Surya by the Sauras, worshippers of Surya. I am called Jesus by the Christians. I am called Allah by the Muslims, etc. I'm called Yahweh by the Jews. I am called George by somebody else, you know. They're just names. They're just names. Now, and there was actually a century ago, there was a philosopher, a Western philosopher who was studying Hinduism, and he said, this is unique. No other religion does this, where you have a whole variety of gods, but one God is singled out and given the chief God position. And he actually invented a Greek term. You might encounter this Greek term. He called this henotheism. Henotheism is a Greek term to describe this religious principle in which that one God is given a particular name. All the other gods are made secondary, so to speak, by that elevation of the one. Anyway, this is elevated into a philosophical principle. There is one God, and the name you call... A final observation before we go on. What a shame it is that this very simple principle isn't understood. Some people call him Narayana. Some call that one God is sometimes called Shiva. That same one God is sometimes called Allah or Jesus. What difference does it make? And why go to war over that? How absurd! People are so committed to a particular name and a particular religious tradition, and they disagree with your name for God and your religious tradition, and they're ready to commit acts of terror. It's just sad and absurd. Okay, enough. He continues. Aham Vishnuraham Brahma, Aham Vishnuraham Shakraschaham Suradhipaha, Shakraschaham Sur. Yeah. Aham Shivascha Somascha, Aham Shivascha Kashyapascha Prajapatihi, Kashyapascha Prajapatihi. We understand? Here again, you don't need to know Sanskrit, you understand this. Aham, I am Vishnu. Aham, I am Brahma. Aham, cha Shakra. Shakra is Indra. I am Indra. Who is Indra? Sura Adhipa. Adhipa means king. I am the king of the Suras, king of the gods. Aham Shivaha cha, and I am Shiva. Aham Somaha cha, and I am the moon. Aham Kashyapaha cha, Prajapati. Prajapati are the sons of Brahmaji, the progenitors of mankind. And I am the Prajapati known as Kashyapa. I am that particular son of Brahma. Notice there are several names in this verse. How many names could we continue? In one, there are two delightful stories. Just very quickly, these two stories really capture numerically how we understand God. In the Bhagavata Purana, it says there are 33. Yeah, 33. No, is that a different one? Yes, 33 crore. 33 crore gods. 33 crore is 330 million. What I find fascinating about that number is that number was probably invented several thousand years ago. 330 million was more than the population of this planet at the time that number was coined. Think about that. When that number, there are 330 million gods, when that scripture was written, when that number was given, that was more than the number of human beings that lived on this planet. What is the implication? Every single person can have their own form of God. So if the scripture was being written today, then how many forms would we have to have today? 7 billion, or whatever is the number. So you get the point. There's another story that has numbers, and this comes actually in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad and elsewhere, where a young student approaches his teacher and says, "Oh, teacher, how many gods are there?" And maybe, I don't remember the detail, he might give that number, 330 million gods. And the boy's reply is, "What was that again? 330? And the teacher says, "Well, there's really 3,300. The boy's reply is, "Say that again?" The teacher says, "There are 330. "What was that?" The teacher says, 33. "What was that?" The teacher says, 3. "What was that?" The teacher says, this is a kicker, the teacher says, 1.5. That's right, it comes in the scripture, 1.5. "What was that?" And finally the teacher says, 1. Look at that story. You start with 330 million and end up with 1. Captures the sense of the Hindu spirit. We can worship that one God in countless ways, any number of ways. All right, and that's what's implied by this verse. He continues. There are other ways of envisioning that Ishvara. Instead of envisioning that Ishvara as a particular form, like the forms on our altar. These forms, by the way, are all based on descriptions found in mythological texts, like Puranas. But there are other ways of envisioning God as well, as described in this next verse. Here. Agnirasyam chiti pado Agnirasyam kshiti pado Agnirasyam kshiti pa Chandradityo chalochane Chandradityo Sadisham chanabha kayo Sadisham chanabha Vayur manasi me sthitaha Vayur manasi. Beautiful description. He says, Agnihi asyam. He says, my asya means face. He says, my face is Agni. He says, padao, my 2 feet, is kshiti, the earth. My face is fire, Agni. My feet are the earth, Chandra and Aditya, Chandradityao, Chandra the moon and Aditya the sun, Lochane are my two eyes. The sun and moon are my two eyes. My feet are the earth. My face is fire. Fire, in some mythologies, beyond the edge of the universe lies fire. In different mythologies, sometimes it's water beyond the edge of the universe. In some other mythologies, it's fire beyond the edge of the universe. Therefore, my face is up there beyond the universe. My face is fire. My feet are down here on the earth. My feet are fire. The sun and moon are my right and left eyes. This is a description that we see also described in Vedanta text. We call Virat Purusha. Virat Purusha is Ishvara for whom the entire physical universe is his body. Many times Ishvara is described like this. Virat Purusha, Ishvara for whom the physical universe is Ishvara's physical body. Therefore, he continues, Sadisham cha nabaha kayaha. My kaya, my body, is nabas. Nabas is space. Sadisham, along with the directions, south, north, east, and west, along with the directions, my space, along with the directions, is my body, and vayuhu manasi me stitaha. The thoughts in my mind is vayu, air, are my thoughts. My thoughts is represented by air. Air, of course, always moving. That's the idea. So the wind is my thoughts, pointing to another aspect of Ishvara, because thoughts are not physical. So we have another, in Vedanta, another representation of Ishvara. Virat Purusha is Ishvara whose physical body, Ishvara for whom the entire physical universe is Ishvara's physical body. What about from the standpoint of subtle body? We make a distinction between Sthula Sharira and Sukshma Sharira. Sthula Sharira, physical body. Sukshma Sharira, subtle body, that which enlivens the physical body. So Virat Purusha is Ishvara whose Sthula Sharira, whose physical body is the entire physical creation, including the planets and stars and space and earth. Then what about Ishvara's Sukshma Sharira? What would that be? Ishvara's subtle body. We could consider Ishvara's subtle body to be the intelligence of the universe. Wherever there's intelligence, there is Ishvara's subtle body. Is there intelligence in you and me? You bet. So that is the manifestation or presence of Ishvara's subtle body. Just as we say Ishvara, whose physical body is the universe, we say Virat Purusha. Ishvara's whose subtle body is the intelligence of the universe. We use the name Hiranyagarbha. Hiranyagarbha is Ishvara whose subtle body is the intelligence of the universe, and Virat is Ishvara whose physical body is the physical universe. So both of these are referred to in this verse. And further, there are more ways of envisioning or understanding Ishvara in our relationship to Ishvara, as described in the next verse. Prapnuvanti nara vipra, prapnuvanti nara, yat kritva karma shobhanam, yat kritva karma, madvidhanena vihita, madvidha, mama deha viharinaha, mama deha. Vipra, O Brahmana, O Markandeya, remember it said boy speaking. He says naraha, people. In the second line, yat kripa karma, whatever actions they do, shobhanam, whatever good actions they do, because good and bad actions, so whatever actions they do, good or bad, those naraha, those people, Prapnuvanti, they obtain the results of those actions. How do they obtain the results of those actions? The actions which are, in the third line, vihitaha, ordained or given, madvidhanena, given by me. We've had this discussion, this very important topic of Ishvara as karma phala data. Ishvara as the giver of the fruits of actions. That's what's being described in this verse. So look what he says. He says, naraha, people, yat kritva karma, whatever actions they perform, shobhanam, ashobhanam, whether they're good actions or not so good actions, what happens, prapnuvanti palam, they receive the results of those actions. Receive the results of those actions how? As ordained by Ishvara. Ishvara, who is present in the universe, has the laws of nature, has the laws of karma. So he says, madvidhanena, according to my order. Madvidhana, according to my order. Vihita, as ordained by me, people receive the results of their actions. Those people, deha viharinaha, whatever those people are doing, their actions are mama, they're my actions, they're ordained by me, governed by me. Notice how this chapter goes from one perspective to another perspective in these 4 verses. First he says, I am not, just summarize, and then we'll go on. First he says, I am Narayana. Then he says, I am the creator, sustainer, destroyer. Then he says, by the way, I'm also Shiva, I'm also Vishnu, I'm also Indra, I'm also Soma, I'm also Kashyapa, I'm also, how many? 330 million. And then he says, by the way, I'm also the God for whom the physical universe is my body. Then he says, I'm also the God for whom the intelligence of the universe is my mind. And then he says, oh, by the way, I'm also the God who determines the results for your actions. I am also the karma paladata. In 4 verses, how many different perspectives have we gotten on who is Ishvara? And having concluded that description of Ishvara, now we have to, the second part of the question was, how did the world get created? So first, who is Ishvara? Done. Second, how does Ishvara create the world? That's our last topic in this chapter. Evam sarvamaham kalam, evam sarvamaham, ihase muni sattama, ihase munis, ashushushurupena, ashushushuru, yavat brahmana buddhyate, yavat brahmana buddhyate. Evam, thus, aham ase muni sattama, O greatest of the munis, O greatest of the sages, the boy addresses Markandeya. Aham ase iha. Aham, I, ase, I remain. Where? Iha. Here. Here what? Where is he? He's on a lotus leaf, right? Not a lotus leaf, a banyan tree leaf. So he says, I remain here on this leaf. Remember that? I won't go back to the picture again. You remember what it looks like? He says, I remain here on this leaf, sarvam kalam, for all time. For all eternity. We're coming now to the symbolism. I remain here on this leaf for all time. Sarvam kalam. Shishurupena. Shishuhu. Shishurupena. I remain here for all time on this leaf, Shishurupena, in the form of a shishu, in the form of a boy, in the form of a child, in spite of the fact, Shishuhu. I am not a shishu. I am not a boy. That's what he says. Aham, Shishuhu. Shishu means boy. Aham ashishuhu. I am not a boy. But for all time, I remain here on this leaf in the form of a boy. I remain here how long or when? He says, Yavad Brahma na buddhyate. As long as Brahmaji doesn't wake up, I just lay here. As long as Brahmaji is asleep, I get to just relax here on my leaf. Which means, when Brahmaji wakes up, this boy has some work to do. And that's what he's going to say in the next verse. As long as the symbolism, by the way, I should make it very clear. In other places, like Bhagavata Purana, it's said, in fact, in Bhagavata Purana, they have the elaborate symbolism of Lord Narayana is laying on his Ananta Shesha, the snake bed, in the bottom of the Kshira Sagara, the Milky Ocean, and Lord Vishnu is just laying there. Lakshmi is massaging his. This is the whole mythological story. And as he's laying there, a lotus comes out of his navel. That lotus blooms, and in that bloomed lotus is Brahmaji, who's sound asleep. Then Brahmaji wakes up, the world comes into existence. As long as Brahmaji is awake, the world continues to exist. When Brahmaji goes back to sleep at the end of the day, at the end of Brahmaji's day, the Brahmaji goes to sleep, the universe, I should not say becomes non-existent, the universe becomes resolved into an unmanifest condition. Brahmaji wakes up, the universe is manifest. Brahmaji sleeps, the universe is unmanifest. This is a story found in other texts and other Puranas, and that's what he references here. He says, as long as Brahmaji remains asleep, I just lay here on my leaf, and I don't have anything to do. I just lay here relaxing. But when Brahmaji wakes up, Tato vibuddhe tasminstu, tato vibuddhe tas sarva loka pitamahe, sarva loka pit eki bhuto hi srakshami, eki bhuto hi sharirad-dvaja sattama, sharirad-dvaja sat. Tataha, then, Sarva Loka Pitamaha. Pitamaha, the grandfather. Grandfather of who? Sarva Loka. Of all people, of all the worlds, the grandfather of all. It's an expression for Brahmaji. Sarva Loka Pitamahe. When Brahmaji, tasmin, when, vibuddhe, when he wakes up. When Brahmaji wakes up, but then, tataha, then what happens? Srakshami, I create. When Brahmaji wakes up, the boy is speaking, when Brahmaji wakes up, Srakshami, I create. I create the entire world, sharirat, from my body. Eki bhutaha srakshami. I alone, eki bhutaha, remaining alone, being alone, I alone create the entire universe out of nothing. Sharirat, from my body. We discussed in the last class the biblical doctrine, creatio ex nihilo, creation out of nothing, is utterly rejected in this tradition. The world is not created out of nothing. The world which was unmanifest in the boy's stomach, sharirat, from the boy's stomach, from the boy's body, srajami, srakshyami. I create the entire world, eki bhutaha. So once again, at the time of creation, it's not creation out of nothing, but rather the unmanifest becomes manifest. Now, symbolism. Notice in both of these stories, I gave the Bhagavata Purana story, Lord Vishnu laying there, so he doesn't do anything. He just lays there. Brahmaji wakes up, the universe is on. But he doesn't do anything. Vishnu doesn't do anything. What about that boy? Let's go back and look at him. Where is he? I like that picture. It's such a distinctive picture. So the boy says that when Brahmaji is asleep, I just lay here on his leaf. And what is he doing while he's laying there on the leaf? He's sucking his big toe. Nothing. When Brahmaji wakes up, he said, Aham srakshyami, I create the world from my stomach, from my body. This boy creates the world? He's just laying there on a leaf. The symbolism of both of these stories shows the act of creation took how much effort? That's the point. The act of creation takes no effort whatsoever. When you and I do something, when we create something, it takes effort. If you cook a meal, it takes effort. If I write an article, it takes effort. To create a meal, to create some writing, it takes effort. So you'd think to create a small meal requires a small effort. To create a big meal requires a big effort. To create the universe would require how much effort? Well, this boy, laying on a leaf, sucking his big toe, while he's sucking his big toe, what does he do? He creates the universe effortlessly. That's the symbolism. Without exerting any effort whatsoever, he creates the world. There's a Sanskrit word associated with this, which is often misunderstood. The Sanskrit word is Leela. Leela means play. And you've heard it said, all of this creation is Bhagavan's Leela, Bhagavan's creative play. The universe is created out of Bhagavan's Leela, Bhagavan's creative play. And it kind of hinges on this story and this image. But that word is really misunderstood. For example, when some tragedy happens, when there's a natural disaster, some earthquake or tsunami or something, and thousands of people are destroyed, I've heard it said, somebody will explain, a well-meaning Hindu, but uninformed Hindu, may say, this is all Bhagavan's Leela. Who can understand? This is all Bhagavan's Leela. That is actually an incorrect usage of the word Leela. I'd like you to understand the proper meaning of the word Leela. Leela does not mean something random or capricious. That's a nice word. Capricious meaning no plan. Do you think Bhagavan, the God of the universe, just does things randomly? Without any plan? Without any intentionality? Without any purpose? That's often implied by the word Leela, and it doesn't mean that at all. The word Leela, in this context, refers to the effortlessness of creation. How much effort does it take to play? Play is not effort. That's the point. How much effort does it take this little boy to create the cosmos? No effort whatsoever. It is the boy's play. It is the boy's Leela. But that Leela or play is absolutely not capricious. It's not random. It's highly intelligent, highly ordered, and let me explain why. One more comment before I explain why. Notice the boy, talking about order, he said the boy says, I don't do anything until Brahmaji wakes up. Already there, it shows there's some order. He doesn't just create the universe at any time he feels like it. which is what the incorrect interpretation of Leela would have it, that the boy creates randomly, capriciously, but he himself says, I create the universe when Brahmaji wakes up. Now, more symbolism. Brahmaji waking up represents something according to the doctrine of karma. Let's examine this process of pralaya and srishti from the standpoint of the doctrine of karma. In fact, you can't understand the cycle of creation without applying the doctrine of karma. Why does the world become unmanifest? How does that take place? Suppose, just to make it very realistic. Suppose each and every one of us had karma, and suppose your karma and my karmas, all of our karmas, were going to be exhausted in the year 2030. I'm just making this up. Suppose your karma was going to be exhausted in 2030. Suppose my karma were going to be exhausted in 2030. Suppose the karma of every living being on this planet were all going to be exhausted exactly at the same time, 2030. Now you say that's pretty unlikely. Yeah, maybe it happens once in 7 billion years. You get the 7 billion being the age of the universe. Here's the point. If all of our karmas simultaneously get exhausted, every living being on the planet perishes. Guess what? That is the karmic indicator for pralaya. It is said that pralaya, the dissolution of the universe passing from a manifest state to an unmanifest state, it is caused by the fructification of karma. When the collective karma of all the living beings is exhausted at the same time, the universe goes into a state of pralaya. Okay? So that, what date? 2030. Don't take that seriously. This is just an example. But now here's the next part. We went through the prior chapter an elaborate analysis of karma, Sanchita karma, and prarabdha karma, and agami karma. Remember that? When our prarabdha karmas are all exhausted in the year 2030, and the universe goes into a state of dissolution, pralaya, notice that our prarabdha karmas are exhausted. What about our sanchita karmas? They're not exhausted. So guess what will happen? Eventually, our sanchita karmas will give rise to a new batch of prarabdha karmas. Remember that discussion? Prarabdha karma is a subset of that sanchita karma. So sooner or later, following the dissolution of the universe in 2030, following that time, eventually all of our sanchita karmas will give rise to new prarabdha karmas. New prarabdha karma means you have to get born in order to experience those prarabdha karmas. Therefore, the sanchita karma, let's get the picture, after pralaya, all that sanchita karma remains. And according to the law of karma, all that sanchita karma eventually has to be fructified. How will that sanchita karma ever get fructified? Only if the world comes into existence again. So what are we saying? Karma creates the conditions for pralaya. Karma creates the conditions for srishti. According to the doctrine of karma, when all the karmas, prarabdha karmas, are exhausted, karma creates the conditions for pralaya, the universe becoming unmanifest. And then Brahmaji waking up represents what? Represents the next cycle of creation, which is caused by the need to fructify all those sanchita karmas which are remaining. So karma creates the situations for pralaya, the universe becoming unmanifest. Karma creates the situation for universe becoming manifest, vyakta. Go back to that word lila. Can lila possibly mean capricious or random? This is all happening according to the doctrine of karma. What happens in your life and my life happens according to the doctrine of karma. What happens in the universe happens according to the doctrine of karma. It does not happen capriciously or randomly. It happens according to this incredible intelligence, Ishvara's intelligence. So, next time you hear the word lila used, know that it refers to the effortlessness with which this boy creates the universe. It does not mean that the universe is somehow random or capricious. It's not random or capricious. Okay. Let us finish. Oops. I think we're finished this. So he says, Tasmin vibuddhe sarva loka pitamahe. When Brahmaji wakes up, tataha tu, thereafter, eki bhutaha hi srakshami, I alone create everything. This boy is speaking, sharirat, from my own body. Dvija sattama, O greatest of brahmanas, he addresses Markandeya, leading to the final verse of the chapter. Markandeya uvacha, Markandeya uvacha, ityuktvan tarhitastata, ityuktvan tarhitastha, sadeva paramadbhutaha, sadeva paramad. Prajaschema prapashyami, prajaschema prapashyami, vichitra bahudha kritaha, vichitra bahudha. So Markandeya concludes his description to Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira's question is how did the world come into existence? How did pralaya take place? Also, and so he says, Tata, O dear one, O Yudhishthira, iti uktva, having spoken thus, the boy, having spoken thus, what did the boy do? Antarhitaha, he disappeared. The boy, having spoken thus, disappeared. Why did the boy disappear? Actually, it's not that the boy disappeared from his vision. I'm catching myself because 2 verses ago, the boy said, I remain here on this life for all time. 2 verses later, Markandeya says the boy disappeared. So what does that mean? It means that Markandeya no longer sees the boy. The boy is still laying there on his leaf for all time. Markandeya no longer sees the boy. And Sahadevaha, that God, he doesn't even use the word Narayana. Sahadevaha, that God, who is Parama Adbhutaha, that most amazing God, Antarhitaha, he disappeared. And then what happened? Imaha prajaha prapashyami. And then prapashyami, I saw. What? Imaha prajaha, all of these creatures. All of these creatures, vichitraha, various creatures, bahudha kritaha, made in all forms. Markandeya says, I saw all of these. Remember the chronology. Markandeya was in the boy's stomach. He saw the world in an unmanifest condition. Then Markandeya came out from the boy's stomach after a long time. When was that long time? Just prior to the next cycle of creation. Just prior to the next cycle of creation, Markandeya comes out from the boy's stomach, and then what does he witness now, having gone out of the boy's stomach? He no longer sees the boy, But what does he see? Imaha prajaha. All these creatures have come back to life. Markandeya witnesses the next cycle of creation. The universe being born from the boy's stomach, the unmanifest universe becoming manifest. Markandeya alone can witness that. Why? Because he is a chiranjeevi. So the story is one thing. It's a delightful story, but the symbolism is so important. The symbolism that demonstrates, as we just saw, the creation out of Leela means effortlessness of creation, and a process of dissolution and manifestation, pralaya and srishti, which is driven not capriciously, but according to the doctrine of karma, and the fact that at the time of pralaya, the universe is not non-existent. The universe is in a resolved or seed condition, unmanifest condition, until it becomes manifest again with the next cycle of creation. Very important symbolism that comes out in this wonderful story. And you'll always remember now, who is that boy on the leaf? You'll never forget that. All right. When we meet for class next time, we'll start the next section of the Mahabharata, which continues, Markandeya continues to teach. We'll see that next time. Let's see some announcements. Tomorrow, Sunday, we'll have our satsang question answer. Hopefully the weather will be nice. If the weather is nice, we'll sit outside and have satsang 6:15. Please come and join us. And then the main announcement, of course, is next Saturday we're celebrating our 16th anniversary. So please plan on joining us next Saturday at 9:30. We begin with puja and homas, which are being conducted downstairs in the dining hall. And then prasad will be served. And then after that, we'll come up upstairs at 11 o'clock. The rest of the program will continue. We have some delightful things to share with you. It'll be a nice program, so please plan on coming. It's also a nice time to invite friends or relatives to join you. They'll enjoy it a lot. So please plan on joining us for our 16th anniversary celebration next Saturday. To get ready for the celebration, we need to set up a bunch of chairs in this hall. Also, we need to set up chairs in a dining hall. We could use a number of you to help. In fact, if 15 to 20 of you are available, it won't take too long. You can get all the chairs up, and then they have some nice lunch ready for you. So if 15 or 20 of you can stay back, you just move the chairs around, get the chairs ready, then enjoy some lunch afterwards. That way we can be ready for next week's celebration. Library will be open after class. We'll conclude with our prayers. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayah Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat.